Welcome, everyone, for spending a bit of time in your morning, noon, afternoon, evening, depending on where you're all calling in from. I'm Emil. How are you, Ben? How's it going?
Good, good. Pretty hot out there. Looking forward to some vacation shortly and looking forward to our chat. It's been a great ride over the past couple weeks and months. Yeah, excited to see what is going to be the crowd today. I think some people will want to hear a bit about Zephyr for those who are not familiar and some other things we've been doing. Hope we will get lots of questions as well.
Yeah, for sure. Let's start by definitely encouraging everyone up front to ask lots of questions. I think maybe just to intro the session, what we have planned for kind of the next 20, 30, 40 minutes, essentially a chat, collaboration between Kapa and of course, you, Ben, representing the Zephyr Project, to talk all about how you can bring technical documentation directly into an IDE, a developer, or building projects. And there's a lot of nuance here, so we thought, hey, let's structure the chat to kind of first start really broad and kind of talk through the why, and then go pretty deep and actually just spend time kind of showing a live demo for folks that want to get into the weeds of how we set this up, how this helps embedded developers and so on. We thought we'd do a couple of things, right? Quick introductions here in the beginning. We'll talk a little bit more about the motivation behind you, Ben partnering up with Kapa and sort of thinking about AI assistance and documentation and so on. Then we'll jump to what we actually set out and kind of did together, and talk a little bit more at the end about where all of this is going. 2026 is a crazy year to be building anything in, for that matter. I think maybe to start off, actually, Ben, do you want to start with a quick introduction first to yourself, and then maybe a little bit more broadly to the Zephyr project, maybe for those that are less familiar?
Sure. I'm wearing a t-shirt that's almost the opposite or the negative of the one on the picture. I'm Benjamin Cabé. I think I've been in this industry for almost 2 decades now. Ouch. I've been spending a lot of time with open source communities in general and all things embedded IoT. For the past 3 years, I've been working with and for the Zephyr project. In a previous life, been spending time at Microsoft on IoT topics as well. The job, I guess, or the role within the Zephyr project is to look after the community at large, what used to be called evangelist, I guess, at some point, developer advocate, making sure people have all the technical resources they need, all the facilitation in terms of making their contributions, building products potentially on top of Zephyr, which I guess we will need to talk a bit about what Zephyr is as well. That's one of my many hats. I'm also sort of like officially the documentation maintainer and manager for the project. So yeah, that keeps me pretty busy.
Cool. Thanks for the intro. I can round us out. I'm Emil. I'm one of the co-founders of Kapa. Work with very technical software and hardware companies to deploy customer-facing AI assistants. We're lucky enough to work with y'all and lots of other cool folks in the embedded and silicon space to do just this. A good starting point, Ben, is just for the folks that are maybe less familiar. Of course, Zephyr is a well-known name in the space, but assume we have folks on here that might not even be too familiar with embedded in the first place. Intro to Zephyr, and I'm super curious.
Yeah, reached on my desk. I have obviously lots of random electronic kits and developer kits on my desk, like those small constrained devices that don't necessarily have a full-blown CPU, but rather a microcontroller, and that power things like your wearables, your smart devices, like home automation devices, things in your cars, in your medical devices, etc. Those constrained devices, when it comes to writing software for them, you typically write, well, firmware, like stuff that's really low level and really close to the silicon, like you mentioned. And for that software, usually you use the C programming language, you use whatever SDKs maybe vendors provide you with. Oftentimes you end up building something that's pretty monolithic and pretty tied to the hardware, which might not necessarily be bad. Come things like COVID a few years back, all of a sudden you were planning on building your product on top of targeting a given vendor, and then supply chain issues, and you're having issues sourcing your components, and all of a sudden you realize that the software that you had was very tied to the hardware, which, I mean, in good software engineering practices is you don't want that, right? You want abstractions, frameworks that they essentially provide you with portability. And essentially that's what Zephyr is. And so it's been around for exactly 10 years. That's a long time in open source. And this is a community that's been growing steadily. And this is now, like, we have some numbers of devices out there. I don't know how many that is. It might be 1 or 2 orders of magnitude more than that. It is open source, so it's hard to know the exact numbers, but it's if you have a Chromebook laptop, a framework laptop, the firmware of those, this is running Zephyr. If you have in your vicinity some of those wind turbines, Vestas specifically, this is a company that does like thousands and thousands of those worldwide. So big and small machines, wearables, anything Bluetooth, there is a really good chance it has Zephyr in it. And so we have support for a wide variety of hardware, the microcontrollers from different vendors, sensors that you may be pulling into your solution, like temperature and humidity and whatnot, all the peripherals, all those bits you need to Zephyr provide you with the framework, with the glue, if you will, to put everything together. There's kind of a learning curve, right? Like you need to learn how Zephyr works, just like if you build on top of, say, Linux, there's also many things you need to know to be efficient when it comes to writing your drivers, etc. So there's a few concepts in Zephyr. Some of them are actually inspired from the Linux ecosystem, and people end up building solutions that, and people being actually, I should also mention, because this gives some food for thoughts for the rest of the conversation. There's many people in the Zephyr community. There's the silicon vendors that work with the upstream open source community to provide the source code that enables Zephyr on their hardware. So they contribute code just like you would see in the Linux community with people writing and providing kernel drivers, etc. You have also people who are building with Zephyr, and they take this work from the community and from the vendors, and they use it to build their own products, right? And they end up writing applications that have, graphical user interfaces and connection to the cloud and QTT and whatnot, those things that we see in IoT. And all those folks, they need good documentation. So
what a way to motivate it. We work together now. Ended up spending a bunch of time on the Zephyr docs. It is exhaustive, right? There is a lot of depth to go into as there should be. I'm curious, what does the typical developer journey look like? When you're sitting down and you're making updates to the docs, when you're thinking about the quick starts and so on, what is the stereotypical, first couple of hours look like with Zephyr, for example?
Zephyr, we have the luxury, I guess, to have been around for quite a while, and we have a very, very comprehensive code base. So in a way, the code is actually, to some extent, the reference. Like we have lots of code samples and stuff like that. So that's usually like a good starting point for folks. Just like, in open source in general, you look at how others have done X, because you're looking at doing something that's reasonably similar and you're going to use it as a starting point. We have lots of documentation as well in terms of the API, like there's documentation. But again, you need to look at the code for that one. Lots of pros, which in an open source project where we are a community, we have people like myself who try and cat herding exercise of like, I try to make sure people write a good documentation for their respective areas. The actual written documentation, the one that's written by humans, might or might not always be with the same level of detail. It is there. We can actually look at it in some demos in a bit. It is there, but it is scattered, I guess, right? And so those first couple hours, like you mentioned, sort of by definition, folks don't necessarily know where to start. They easily have, or early on, they have a feel that, yes, the information is there. Because Zephyr is crazy active. It's like hundreds of contributors, lots of activities on the GitHub repo. So I think people are not worried that the information is there. It's just that however good we are at organizing our code samples, our API documentation, our table of contents, etc., you need a good search engine, basically, right? And we've been, I think, for a couple of years now, we have things like Google Programmable Search in the docs, which helps, but it is just generic search, right? And so you get hits if you know what to look for. And sometimes also, however good Google might be with us, it might be lagging behind. Like I was just earlier this week, there was an issue in the project that was assigned to me because someone was looking for support for a particular part. And they looked it up, and the built-in search engine we have in the docs alongside Kappa, but like historically we had the Google search. This is still there. This would give you hits. Sometimes it's lagging like a couple of days behind. And Zephyr moving so fast, you have a 404 for a page that, yeah, no, it's moved. Google hasn't picked it up yet. And so it's that particular individual, I don't think was necessarily completely turned away. Or like, yeah, they understand that it's still there. It's just moved, confident that the project has what they need, but search sometimes can be hit or miss. At least it used to be.
Yeah. What I think that's a really, really good overview. And I think you alluded to something there that I think maybe we should just jump to now, which is essentially, hey, how do you address a problem like this? Like, what if we ended up, I guess, partnering up on together? And maybe a quick segue in here, I can also give a very, very brief intro to Kappa, and then we can just go perhaps look at a couple of demos of how this is live. But I guess the broader introduction is we started Kappa a couple of years ago to essentially set out to solve, I think, pretty much word for word the problem you described. We're going through a crazy time now where like AI is unlocking so many interesting use cases, but I think the one that's really, really close to heart for us is there's so much untapped, I think, potential from developers to build even more interesting work and kind of close the gap between what's possible with solutions and what the kind of the average user can do. And for us, that has essentially meant setting out to work with some of the world's top software and hardware companies to sort of ship grounded AI assistants, both initially to cater to human users and developers, and we'll look at that and what that means, but increasingly here in the last 6 months as kind of coding harnesses have gotten really good, also means making all that knowledge really easily available directly in IDEs, which of course is the topic of today's conversation. We're lucky enough to work with lots of exciting folks in the embedded space like Espressive and Nordic and Silicon Labs and so on. So it's a space we're very, very excited about. I think maybe with that in mind, instead of asking more philosophical questions, why don't we show what we partnered up on if you're game for that, Adam?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, but a bunch of things, and actually Rini in the chat is asking the problem I was just describing. Part of the solution is embedding the Kappa chatbot into the docs. Try and share my screen to show some of the things. Let's make this interactive. If you, Emil, or others have questions and thoughts, I will be showing whatever is more relevant. I think it's loading. Yeah, perfect. How about I actually show the thing I was talking about just before? Someone 2 weeks ago, and actually, which adds to the problem. It shouldn't be the case, but there's just so many issues being opened due to the size of the project that sometimes one doesn't see the issues being open. This one I had missed. Like I didn't have a chance to answer this person personally. 2 weeks ago, someone was looking for a real-time clock driver support for a part. They did use the built-in search, like I was mentioning, and they had issues. And so let's try and go through the same experience as them. They have a part they want to use. Real-time clock, for those who don't know, this is basically those integrated circuits that use a coin cell battery typically because they really don't need that much power. They are just here to keep track of time, even if you're removed like the AA or AAA batteries from your thingy, your home automation device might still be able to remember what time it is when you turn it back on or when power comes back, if it has an RTC. So whatever this person is doing, they need an RTC. They were using, I guess they did something like that. Like we have several search features or search backends in the Zephyr documentation. By default, historically, this has been Google search, which is the default for folks. And this gives you a bunch of results. It turns out that, at least as of today, because there were some refactorings literally days ago and weeks ago, some of those results, this one, especially like legacy, this one, it's been dropped. Like it's kind of like the perfect demo, I guess. We have a perfect example of something that eventually will disappear from Google knows that we have a super active documentation. They index us really often. I mean, some of those results are probably pointing to the sort of the new home or the non-legacy version of this thing. Yeah, this one's fine. But you could say that it's getting there. Google will eventually catch up. Meanwhile, this person has questions. And so they could use Kappa as a search engine, which it has the merit of giving you answers really fast. Like if you kind of know what you're looking for, you're looking for a page basically, or a section of a page, then you get the result immediately. And like all of those, like by definition, they are going to be working links. Or the person, and they probably didn't realize that, or at least they, in parallel, they were nice enough to report the issue they had with Google. But if they were to use the Ask the Docs assistant that we have to quote, they could get a lot more. It could be more like, how do I integrate the law in my application? This one is going to be using all the sources we have, because like one thing that we don't want, and there's many people in the community who are very vocal about it, and like they should, we don't want those answers to be hallucinated. We want this to correspond to stuff that is effectively proper Zephyr stuff, Zephyr code and Zephyr guidelines and Zephyr recommendations. So what Kappa, context of Zephyr, what Kappa is aware of is a bunch of sources, one being the source code, one being the online documentation, which it pulls off many times a day. So it's like always accurate. It knows about some of our wiki pages. It knows about our GitHub issues, our GitHub pull requests, at least the recent ones, so that it has a sense of, well, I can demo that, I guess. It will probably be part of this conversation I'm going to have with the bot. This is only the beginning. Like I've asked, how do I integrate the RTC, blah, 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 in my application? It's telling me things that are, to the best of my knowledge, actually correct. Like this is really referring to the new version or the new way to deal with this IC. It used to be a counter driver. Now it's a multi-function device thingy with an RTC sub driver underneath it. So yes, that's the way to do it. It goes as far as telling you what feature should I enable to make sure that it's being available in my system. It shows me a bit of how to use in the code, like I mentioned, this is to get the time, like the IC is responsible to keeping track of time. So I can at some point use Zephyr APIs to ask the IC to give me the information, alarm support, etc. Well, it's spoiling my demo. I wanted to follow up with a question, but it's actually already giving me a heads up. This person, had they asked Kappa directly, they would have already gotten the heads up that, hey, by the way, the old way to do it, it's gone. Now you should use what I just described above. And it's doing that because it found the information in the migration guide, because whoever dropped support for the old way of doing this took the time to actually write stuff in the migration guide. But had they not, I am pretty sure, and this is probably showing up in the sources here, it would have still probably found the information in the recent pull requests that dropped the support. In fact, I can ask more detail. When was the old way dropped something? And in addition to the migration guide that it found as a source, it should be able to find, so yeah, more details regarding the migration guide entry. Yeah, it's not linking to the pull request, or it doesn't look like Git, but I know for a fact that it's there. I guess it doesn't need to, I mean, it answered the question though. It says that it's been removed. It was deprecated a couple of releases ago, and now it's going to be fully dropped. It is effectively gone, incoming 4.5 release. So yeah, that's the experience from the docs, like right from the documentation, and people can still sort of like navigate and mind their business. They can interact with the documentation, and everything is going to be grounded in the code, the existing documentation. You want to switch to, yeah. I mean, like, oh, there's probably questions.
There's a couple of questions. Actually. Yeah, I figured.
Help me go through them.
Yeah, let's go through them. I think there's a couple that are kind of overlapping. I think Rini asked a good question, right? How do you ensure when you're adding something like this, it's not adding hallucinations in the result? And I think Albin asked a similar question. Hey, what does the evaluation process look like for determining whether an answer is safe and accurate enough for embedded development? Maybe two ways of answering this, and maybe we can do this a bit of a shared answer. I can explain a little bit.
Yeah, explain your side of the thing. Yeah,
exactly. And then you explain how maybe you went through as sort of an evaluator to determine whether or not Kappa is good. The way to think about Kappa as a system is it's our job to make sure these systems are as good as they possibly can get. At this point, more than 200 big companies, right? Folks like Grafana and N8N and Silicon Labs and lots of folks that they trust us to really constantly deliver as accurate answers as you possibly can. The way that works under the hood is We run constant evaluations and benchmarks against every single type of way to build a system like this. In the early days, it was, called RAG. Now these systems have evolved way past that for them to essentially be sort of agentic retrieval. You call them what you will, but some version of, hey, question comes in, you want to go look across, a very broad and complex knowledge base, whether it's the code base, whether it's documentation. You build up some information from your first search, and then you essentially keep going in loops until you build enough information to sort of deliver an answer. And you do all this. You try to do this in as few seconds as you possibly can to not leave a user waiting. And then at the end, you, of course, make sure that all your prompting, everything you do is really focused on doing two things. It's grounding every part of an answer directly in source material. So it's really really forcing the models to cite. So you'll notice that in the answer, I think, Ben, you have on screen here too, there's always going to be citations. And if you ask a question, Rini, to your point, where there just isn't an answer in the documentation, either because Ben and team have not had time to go and add that because the ecosystem is moving so fast, or maybe it's just because it's a bit of it's not a thing that's been built into Zephyr yet, but it could actually be a feature request. In that case, the model will behave in a very specific way. It'll say, I don't know. It'll flag that to Ben and team as, hey, here's a potential content gap for them to look into later. That's just a recurring process. We have a big research team on our side.
Yeah, for us, the worst
Ben,
case, the worst case scenario for me in the past few weeks, it would be what might happen is not what I would call an hallucination. It's more if we have an area that's like really thin in terms of like it's lacking documentation, then yes, one could say that the user, they're going to get an answer to their question, which is, that thing doesn't exist, or like, I don't know how to help you. And so that person, like day one, they won't get the answer. They might be, but it's on us. Like if some documentation is missing, LLM is only as good as what information is there written somewhere, and is not just tribal knowledge from the community. And so that question, like Emil just described, that category of questions that keep getting poor coverage, and for which the tool is flagging the questions as Zephyr doesn't have an answer for that, then we can start working on this. And either it is something that actually exists and for which it's just a matter of writing the docs that are missing, or it's also sending a signal of, no, we don't have the thing, but people keep asking about it, so we better try and add that, right? So you mentioned, Emil, like as part of the evaluation, I think that for me was kind of like if not a selling point, something that was really reassuring. It's really hard to the tool it really knows when it doesn't know. And if I were to ask something like, how can I run Blinky, which is like our sort of hello world of blinking an LED on the board on ESP32 P4 Pico, like I have this board on my desk. I want to like, what does it take? And one thing I know for sure is that as of today, we shouldn't be, we don't support this board. So it should actually tell me that the board is not supported. And it does, right? Like if the board is not yet supported, you will need to port it. That's when you ask very confidently as a user, like, how do I do this? Or I've started experimenting with this and that. How do I go on? When the tool realizes that, no, this can't be real, it will tell you and flag it. So yeah.
Cool. Hey, awesome. I appreciate you saying those things, Ben. I'm curious, should we take a look at kind of the very 2026 take on this? Because there's a little button at the top here that says use MCP, but maybe as a precursor to that, I'd be curious to get your overall take, right? I think this is, of course, very much the year of the coding, coding agents and Claude Code and Codex, and everyone has their own take and so on. But I'm curious, maybe what's your take on how that's been received overall and embedded? Because I think a lot of people are used to using a lot of these agents, and they do so in maybe more traditional software engineering contexts and so on. And I think there's some gotchas, at least we've heard before, in kind of the embedded world. But curious to get your overall take on what those past kind of 6 to 9 months have been like. Yeah.
It's so I think lots of people are still sort of trying to figure out what it means for them, and whether they should be scared or start to adopt it. Me personally, the way I see all those things is, and especially when working on a code base like Zephyr, it's just control F, if you will, or grep on steroids. Like it just helps surface information that's already there. Does it like really well. If I were to use VS Code, cursor, or whatever without Kappa, by just the fact that I am in my IDE, in my code editor, and the code editor already sees the Zephyr code base, already sees the Zephyr documentation, it will already be doing a great job, right? Like it's not like it's fully indexed, but with probably like 10 times or 100 times more tokens, I will still get like really good results out of my IDE and whatever agents I turn on into the IDE. But then there's also the option of basically using Kappa as an MCP. In this case, basically the IDE, rather than trying to do all the grepping on its own, and it will keep basically coming up with the same patterns of, I mean, someone asks, how do I do this driver? And then the agent will be like, okay, I need to grep for wildcard driver, wildcard in the code base to try and figure out an answer to that. Instead, it would just tap into a Kappa to get to tap into the curated sources that are already there. I think for embedded, one thing that takes time to sort of get one's head around is it involves hardware. So whatever code you end up writing, it better be good enough that you're not going to damage your hardware or break it or not make good use of it and like kill your battery, because I mean things like that, it's a real concern. I'm trying to like just embrace it to the point where, and we see more and more people talking about things like that, like when you realize that, I mean, yeah, those agents are basically pretty good nowadays. Just let them drive your hardware. Like it's going to be like helping you write code. It's going to help you write tests. It's going to help you flash and like run and upload the tests to your hardware. It's going to run, analyze the results, figure out that whatever thing you're after, you're not quite there yet, so it will adapt. A weird mindset in a way, you could say.
Yeah.
It's like changing your perspective on many things. But I think this is where, in some ways, where embedded is going to go. And this is saving so much time, because embedded it's a lot of fun until it's not, because it takes time you change one line of code and it takes a while to like recompile and deploy it on the target and stuff like that. Maybe your whatever agent and whatever MCP servers you have, they can actually help you maybe simulate some of the stuff. It turns out Zephyr already has tons of solutions to simulate. You have documentation for it. You don't want to read the documentation, just point your IDE at it and it will help you do all the scaffolding for all your tests, right?
Amazing. Hey, thanks so much for sharing that. And that's really, really cool. I think you said it really well. Like these agents have gotten really, really good, but anything you can do to help them get the right context efficiently at the right time is super, super helpful. So it's exactly as you all have done, and kind of the doc side. I think we're seeing a lot of folks start to just make MCP servers really easily accessible, so you can sort of one-click install them, and then it just means next time Cloud Code is like trying to work through stuff, it's able to very quickly pull the latest information from kind of a curated set of sources. I think one interesting thing there too that I think we're increasingly beginning to see is, folks like yourself will immediately go, hey, amazing, but now I'm writing documentation for 2 users. Right? I'm writing documentation both for humans that need to read it, and I'm also writing it for agents. And historically, it's very unclear how to cater for both. And then I think the world is still figuring out, like it's like LLMs to text have historically been very snake oily and these types of things, right? There's a lot of like things that are being shown at the moment that maybe necessarily aren't 100% proven to work, other than writing good, consistent docs. But I think there's a really interesting thing that some folks are beginning to do now with MCP servers, which is like try to infer when an MCP server is working with your docs, like for example, the one you have, Ben. It's like, hey, where does it appear like agents are getting stuck in your documentation, much like humans are? That's something we're really excited about building towards, and have a lot of stuff internally working in this direction, at least. Really, really cool. I want to be mindful of time. We're at 35 past, and there's some good questions in as well. I thought maybe one place to sort of quickly round out, and just to keep this future looking, Ben, I'm curious to get your take. Again, these are just, I guess, way too small screenshots of kind of
I want your take. Like, I don't want you to share details about like your customers, but how are we looking? Like how because I mean, it's been great. Like we suddenly get like thousands literally of questions every week. It's people are adopting it. That's great.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm more than happy to share. I mean, maybe what I can even do is just share screen quickly on the dashboard just to give folks, and then maybe give a very quick voiceover of what we're seeing if that works, Ben. Maybe just to contextualize what we've essentially done to kind of power the chat under the hood, to your point as well, Ben, is say, hey, first of all, let's make sure we ground the agent in all the good content that you're producing, whether that's everything in the Discord, GitHub issues, PRs, the docs, everything sort of staying up to date. So that's kind of the grounding behind the docs. And then, of course, to answer your question, how's it looking? I mean, it's looking really good, right? So I think just since launching a couple of weeks ago, right, for the first
I think it's been about 2 months. Yeah,
2 months or so. This is looking really, really good and really healthy. I think in terms of kind of the main metric we look at to determine, hey, how is Kapa performing so far? We actually always scroll down to understand, hey, what is the certainty rate? This is really what is the share of responses where the bot is able to help a user self-serve versus what is the share of responses where it goes, I don't know. And like, there's always going to be some of those that's actually healthy because you don't want to cater to everything, and projects move fast, but kind of global average across all Kapa projects hovers around sort of 12 to 14%. So the fact that you're hovering below this, I think, suggests to me that, no surprise.
Yeah,
there's a lot of depth in documentation.
In fairness, sometimes it not all those 10%, but there are instances of people asking questions that are just like almost impossible to answer because it's not yet fully clear what they want to do. And of course, there's not going to be a certain answer to that. One thing before I forget, and I think it's probably showing also on the dashboard somewhere, I would love actually your tips on advertising this more. Many people realize this naturally, but you can actually interact with the chatbot in your own native language, which makes like a huge difference for us, like as a global community. We have it here. Like 10% of people interacting with it in Chinese. I mean, I shouldn't say obviously. We don't have documentation in Mandarin or in any other non-English language. It's technical documentation. It's not that hard to translate without losing accuracy and meaning, which Kappa does. So if I were to ask, I would get the exact same reply and the exact same interaction in French or whatever. I don't know how many languages you support, but the one I know I've been using sometimes, and it just works great.
No, that's really cool. It's one of these magical benefits of LLMs, right? You give them content in one language, and you can design a system around it to essentially be able to scale up. And I think similarly, maybe this is the one to end on too. I think the thing I get most excited about looking at now from kind of a dashboard perspective, and this is all brand new stuff, is understanding increasingly how agents are doing that too, because it's almost a different language when you start to look at the questions and how people phrase them and so on too. You'll notice also that the types of questions agent asks, it's always framed more cleanly. Agents have a certain very precise way of saying, hey, I want to know exactly this thing, right?
Yes.
So it's cool to see. No surprise, quad code dominates. Cool.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Hey, I want to be mindful of time. I think we're closing up on it. I think there's one question we haven't addressed yet, but maybe this is actually an interesting one to get your closing take on here, Ben. But I think Michael, in the beginning of the conversation, asked, hey, he recently ported another project on Zephyr from, I think, one bit of hardware to Nordic. Half of it could be copy paste, and the other half needed code rework. He essentially asked, hey, is this kind of expected? Do you share the same experience?
It sounds like a lot, like if it's literally a half in terms of like lines of code, etc. That sounds like a lot, but it also depends. Like was it proper Zephyr, or was it like the Nordic flavor of Zephyr sort of thing? But this is typically the thing. And actually, we have a bunch of pull requests from folks who want to, to your point, Emil, like migration from X to Y, or migration from Zephyr version 4.2 to 4.3, those kind of things. We try to have like really good English like prose about how to do those things, but it still requires some work, which you describe as copy pasting. Michael, agents can be really good at, even more so when some of those migration guides write them in a way that's geared towards LLMs. So Kappa gives us like a really good, it indexes and it learns a lot from our existing migration guides. So it picks that up, and your agents would pick that up. We are looking at like having here and there even more targeted skills so that it's even more like clear that, yeah, no, that's the way to do it. And no messing around if you're an agent or if you're a human that needs like really clear bullet points on what to do when to improve there. Long story short, like half of the thing needing to be reworked, it probably wasn't maybe using Zephyr properly and using all the abstractions like it should have, because it sounds like a lot, but yeah.
Amazing. Cool. Thanks for taking that question. I think that also brings us to an end. Ben, anything you think we should have covered? Anything that would have been interesting for the audience that really should have to
No, probably not. We should go to Zephyr, the Zephyr website and Zephyr documentation. Go and give it a try if you're not familiar with it already. It should be as easy as Arduino to get started. If you already have like an Arduino board or anything resembling a Raspberry Pi or something like that, and you're curious about what Zephyr does, check it out. Ask Kappa for some inspiration on how to get started. I'm always available online on Discord and, well, everywhere really. So yeah, feel free to follow up with questions and ideas and stuff.
Amazing. Let's end there. Thank you so much for spending time here. I really enjoyed the session, and excited for the continued collaboration.
Yeah, likewise. My pleasure. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.